Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for holding this hearing today. This Saturday in New London, Connecticut, there's going to be a memorial service for Elva Graveline, who was a certified nurse's aide who worked at a local hospital there, 52 years old, mother of two, grandmother of three, who succumbed to COVID a couple weeks ago. And again, there were stories in the human face of people who really are the good guys. She was a caregiver who treated her job as a CNA as a calling, not as a job, 23 years, described as kind-hearted. And again, it just reinforces that this is not a theoretical academic issue. This is really about human beings who are doing right by all of us in terms of keeping this country going forward. I just want to touch base with both witnesses about the fact that this is not the first pandemic that OSHA has encountered. The AIDS, HIV pandemic in the mid-'80s, late '80s, and early '90s, OSHA acted, and it acted very swiftly to put into place real standards in terms of bloodborne pathogens. My wife is a nurse practitioner. She worked at Bellevue back in the '80s there, and she still remembers the day where, again, you drew blood and used needles with no gloves, and there was no such thing as disposable needles. OSHA created, with a standard, an enforceable standard, the regime that we now just sort of take for granted when we go into hospitals. Was OSHA wrong to institute a standard versus just operating with guidelines?
I believe OSHA followed the direction of this committee through a statutory requirement to establish that standard.
Correct. I mean, it was with prodding from Congress that they actually moved. And again, it wasn't a 5 to 20 year process. I mean, it happened in much swifter terms. And again, Dr. Howard, did OSHA do the right thing by implementing a standard to deal with AIDS, HIV?
I think so, and I'd like to point out that they followed California's lead in that area.
So again, when we talk about having a standard put into place, this is not some wild, unprecedented sort of notion. I mean, the fact of the matter is it's just part of the reality every day when people walk into doctors' offices or hospitals. Again, Dr. Howard, your description of how to safely disinfect N95 masks that you testified to earlier was, again, I think a learning experience for all of us about the fact that you've got to really actually do more than just throw it in the washing machine, that there's real issues that you've got to do it the right way. Why wouldn't that sort of standard be really something that would help guide a lot of employers? And I'll tell you, because this is relevant in Connecticut, which again has been very hard hit. Again, we've had tremendous donations from private individuals as well as FEMA in terms of getting masks, N95 masks. But some of them, as you point out, are different. They're not all the same. So if you're a hospital or a nursing home trying to organize this, I mean, you need, it sounds to me, based on your testimony, more than just lumping them all together and disinfecting them in exactly the same fashion. So why wouldn't that be a good thing to have that more precise advice that you described out there, so that employers really would know that you've got to do more than just treat them all the same?
Well, I certainly think that the more specification that you could provide an employer, the more helpful it is to that singular workplace. The problem is we can't do guidance that's highly specific to each establishment, so we have to do fairly general guidance and then look at the application, help employers, both NIOSH, CDC, and OSHA, through their consultation service, apply those guidelines to their specific workplace.
But again, having a standard which just says you got to look at the manufacturer's specifications when you are going to reuse N95 masks. That's just, like you pointed out, necessary to make sure that these workers, when they reuse them, are actually going to be protected. And again, I would just say, one of my wife's good friends back home is a nurse at a local hospital who's been intubating COVID patients with reused N95 masks. I mean, they were basically reusing them over a period of 7 days. You could not get in a more high-risk situation than intubating a patient as a worker. And, that just shows how life and death having, real standards out there so that people like Dawn are going to be safe in terms of doing, just amazing work in terms of saving lives. I yield back.
Thank you.